There was glass just like broken in the parking lot out front, people milling about and drinking and smoking, and I roll up in my little floral sundress and rainbow ukulele case and my songbook full of kids' songs for adults, and I think to myself, I shouldn't be here.
That's Al Lutz from Plattsburgh, and on today's episode, rock and roll, Ted Kaczynski, and the one song that brings even the rowdiest punks together. From NCPR and the Adirondack Center for Writing, this is The Howl. I'm Ethan Shanty. I feel like such a stooge saying this, but when you play in a band, you make a lot of sacrifices. Don't rip my head off. I know that playing in a band is a thing that I choose to do, kind of. I mean, mostly I feel like I have to do it, like I might actually lose my mind if I don't go out and play live music. But it's certainly not without those challenges, and yes, it sacrifices. Especially when you're just starting out and you've got no money, you settle for 99-cent cheeseburgers and burritos for 2 out of every 3 meals. You have to get comfortable sleeping on strangers' couches or sleeping upright in the passenger seat of a van. You give up a lot of time at home with your friends or your partner or your pets, but man, it's really fun. And in the first season of the Howl podcast, I told you my story about the very first tour I ever went on with my band. That was the story where my car got totaled as we drove to a show that was canceled anyway. I'm still in that same band, but I'd like to think that I've learned a lot since then. I'm trying to eat a little bit better on the road, we're trying to shower more regularly, and I'm trying to be positive about the things that I can't change. This summer I went on tour again to Chicago and Pittsburgh and back to the North Country, and one of those stops was at a bowling alley called West Side Bowl in Youngstown, Ohio. And as we rolled up, there were a couple punk kids sitting outside the alley drinking Monster energy drinks and smoking cigarettes. I said, "Hey, are you guys here for the show tonight?" And they said, "No, we're playing." And I thought, oh, is this going to be one of those shows where the only audience members are in the other bands? Well, it turned out that I was right. But I didn't really care because bowling was on the house, and pizza was on the house, and beers were on the house, and the bowling alley even had a washer and dryer and shower in their basement. You don't really know how much you take laundry and showers for granted until you're stuffed in a van with 4 other sweaty dudes. So only 5 people actually paid to get into that show, and I could tell that some of the other people on our tour were a little bit bummed about it, but we played our 20 minutes, we got off stage, I changed out of my sweaty clothes, and I said,
F it, dude. Let's go bowling.
And that night I drank my weight in Jenny Cream Ale for free, and I ate plenty of pizza, also for free. I lost some money at the claw machine, I sucked at Simpsons pinball, but I got the high score in bowling, a whopping 106 points. The owners of the bowling alley locked us in the basement until the next morning so we wouldn't be able to ransack the place, but otherwise we got free reign. We stayed up talking until 3 a.m., one at a time using the shower tucked away in the corner of the basement. We talked about other bad shows that we'd played. We talked about ex-girlfriends and boyfriends, good bands and bad bands that we'd been in, and I knew, as I blew up my air mattress and got ready to sleep on the floor of that bowling alley, I'd rather be nowhere else. Al Lutz had a brief experience on a DIY punk tour as well, and as I talked, I realized just how similar our experiences were. Al is from Plattsburgh, and it's entirely likely that our paths might have crossed before in the DIY scene, but somehow we never formally met till now. We got together at the Plattsburgh Public Library to record this story.
I am kind of an amateur singer-songwriter. I like to write and record music, mostly for myself, but I had played a few shows just at coffee shops and open mics for friends and family. And in the summer of 2013, I thought I need a change of scene, and I really want to see if people will respond to my music outside of, people I already know or am blood related to. So I connected with a friend of mine who was pretty experienced as a touring musician. And when I say tour, I'm not talking about Taylor Swift era's level tour, with actual tickets and promotion. Very much like punk shows in basements, playing people's living rooms, the odd collectively run art gallery, coffee shops, cafes, that kind of thing. So my friend used his connections to set shows up for us around the Northeast, and we had, I think, 8 or 10 solid dates booked, and I would be in charge of the logistics of just getting us from point A to point B. So I tirelessly prepared for my world debut, right? I had my repository of 2.5-minute ukulele pop songs. I had my little home recorded CD with jewel cases that I had literally stitched together on my sewing machine out of upcycled cardstock. I had my thrifted screen printed t-shirts that I had worked, for days on. And I had all of my MapQuest directions printed out because, again, it was 2013. This was not peak smartphone. So day 0 of our tour, the day before we are going to play any shows, I swing by my friend's house, and he has locked himself out of his apartment. And we have to drive around town to find his roommate so we can get the spare key so he can get into his apartment so he can start packing. So we really had wildly different preparation methods for this, different outlooks, if you will. And on top of this, we were both really going through our own heavy stuff. I had just lost my dad to suicide a few months prior, and my friend was going through some deep mental health issues himself. So, not the ideal circumstances to embark on an 8-day road trip where we are just in the car with no one but each other and about to play shows at these different venues. And the first few days of tour were fine. We got to where we needed to go. I think our first show was at a coffee shop where there were maybe 5 people, none of whom were actually expecting music, which was pretty clear from our merch sales. And after about day 5, right, we were just losing money left and right. And anything that we did earn through passing around, an empty mayonnaise jar in someone's basement for tips, we just put right back into gas and food, which meant we were really hangry on top of all of this, pent-up tension and frustration with each other. So about day 6 or 7, toward the end of the tour, right, we're not even on speaking terms except for when he stops to pause and read excerpts of Ted Kaczynski's Unabomber Manifesto to me. So, yep, that was a little detail I had suppressed. So we finally get to Connecticut, and we roll up to my friend's contacts there, and they were a folk punk band who had a house who had helped set this show up. And I'm just so grateful to be parked. I'm happy to get out of the car. I'm so glad to have some fresh air. And I take my little backpack full of floral sundresses and my little rainbow ukulele case. And, I'm already wearing my foot tambourine so I can make my grand entrance. And we open the door. And what I can only describe as the sponge-like density of the thickest fog of marijuana smoke billows out of the house, enough to give the neighbors a contact high. I look at my friend and he says to me, "Oh yeah, by the way, these guys are neck deep in the weed game." And at that point I was not really, I didn't really partake, but my friend did. So he sits down, he immediately starts partying with these guys, and I'm trying to keep a clear head. I stay sober because in addition to getting ready for the show with normal pre-show jitters, I had also emailed the very first love of my life, the person who broke my heart in college, who lived in Connecticut. And I was like, "You should come to this show." So we start getting ready for the show, and as we're driving there, I learned that we're 2 of 6 acts on the bill that night. And up to that point, we had played shows with maybe 2 other people at most, but this was going to be a long night, and my friend was not in his right mind. So we pull up to the venue, and it's this short, squat building that's painted completely black. Now, I don't know if I imagined bars on the window or if there actually were, but there was glass just broken in the parking lot out front, people milling about and drinking and smoking, and I roll up in my little floral sundress and rainbow ukulele case, and my songbook full of kids' songs for adults, and I think to myself, I shouldn't be here. And they also thought I shouldn't be here. But the bouncer, Joaquin, was like super nice and helped us unload all our stuff. And I see the love of my life who I had invited to this show from across the bar, and I go up to the person and they look at me and say, yeah, so did you hear about the stabbing here last night? And it was then that one of the bands we were playing with, Yankee Brutal, takes the stage. And they start playing. And I didn't know it was possible to hear music in my lungs, but I did. And people were going just bananas for this band. They were moshing, they were sweaty, they were kicking, they were screaming, they were just having a great time and drinking. And the band ends their set, and then the next band comes up on stage, still bleeding. And then everybody's moshing, the bodies are smushed together, everyone's drinking, everyone's sweating, everyone's having a great time. And I just keep having this sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach that I should not be there. And my friend looks at me with his glassy red eyes and says, well, if there's ever a time to learn how to work a crowd, it's now. So there's this kind of brief intermission where everyone goes out back and there's this big bonfire and some of the other bands play, and they're actually doing acoustic sets. They're not mic'd, they don't have amps, and nobody is paying any attention to them. I mean, they're just like screaming their lungs out. No one hears it. No one cares. So I had a decision to make. I had 3 options. 1, I could bail. I could just not play, and literally no one would have noticed or cared. In fact, they probably would have been grateful. 2, I could have played my songs out back at this fire pit for no one to listen to with no mic. Or I could go back inside and I could set up on that stage and I could play to an empty room. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to save my voice. I'm going to go for option 3. I'm going to play my songs to this empty room and I'm just going to call it a day. I'll just do it as quickly as I can, get in, get out. So I get up on stage, Joaquin hooks me up to the sound, I do a little sound check, and the love of my life, Heartbreaker, is literally the only person who is watching this show. And as I start playing, people kind of come in, definitely not to see me, just to get more drinks, but they kind of realize what's going on, and they're like, is this a joke? Is this real? Is this a plant? What is this? So they go out, and they grab their friends, and they come in. And like, I know they're laughing at me, right? Like, I went to middle school, I can tell. And after my second song, there's just something that snaps inside of me. And I go into what I can only describe as angry teacher mode. And I start scream singing my songs on my little acoustic electric ukulele, and people actually quiet down. I had a bar full of drunk punks almost completely silent because I think they were just so confused. They did not know what was going on. They did not know why I was there. And then I decided to pull out my secret weapon. I'm not one for playing covers, but I had been working on a-ha's Take On Me with full falsetto, and I started playing it very badly, messing up all the chords, probably not even singing the right words, but the feeling was there, and people really responded. And they started singing along to Take On Me by a-ha, and at one point we were all just singing that high part together, and it was magical and it was incredible. And I realized, okay, this is it. Yes, I have the crowd on my side. I'm gonna close with my big finisher. So I had written a song which was very head, shoulders, knees, and toes-esque in that it required some audience participation. And I taught everybody the dance moves to this song that I had written about love and about how life changes. And they all sang along, and they all did the dance moves. And by the end of the show, the bouncer came up to me and gave me a huge hug and said, I remember listening to Take On Me when I was in high school. And I went to my little merch station. And that night, I sold more merch at that show than I had sold in every single show combined leading up to it. And I think about that night, and I think about the 3 huge lessons I learned, which is 1, never judge a book by its cover. Like, that one seems obvious. Number 2, I'm like totally more punk than I thought I was. And number 3, everybody loves a-ha's Take on Me.
Thanks to Al Lutz for telling me their story. Thanks to you for being here. And don't forget, punk rock is for everybody. But you might want to ask yourself, do I really want to be locked in a bowling alley overnight? The Howl is a co-production of NCPR and the Adirondack Center for Writing in Saranac Lake. The show is written, edited, and produced by me. I'm Ethan Shanty. The NCPR digital team is Doyle Dean, Bill Hanel, and Caitlin Kelly. David Summerstein is our script supervisor. Our theme music is by famous letter writer of Plattsburgh, and the music that you're hearing right now is by Al Lutz. To find out more about the Adirondack Center for Writing, or to see when we're going to be telling stories in your community, and to hear more music by Al, visit ncpr.org/howl. Coming up on next week's show.
In Ghana, your SIM card is your bank account. And I did what everyone's biggest fear is when they're on an outhouse. I dropped my phone. This is not your every North Country privy or Adirondack privy. This is a 30-foot pit. 15 people were crowded in it, looking at this toilet like it was the smelliest claw machine you'd ever seen.
For North Country Public Radio, I'm Ethan Shanty. This is NCPR.